Good afternoon to those of you that have tuned in. I'm Dr. Jimmy Henderson, a cognitive scientist and metaphysician, and this afternoon I'm going to be talking about something which I think has been popping up quite regularly and is quite important. The concept of the human ego, what it is, how it functions, and what we can do with it. Many people believe that the ego is actually is us. We are the ego. But strictly speaking, that's not true. The essence of the ego is that sense of self-realization, self-awareness, the thought that I'm alive, that I'm aware. That is the essence of the ego. But unfortunately, within its ambit, it draws to itself a lot of beliefs, negative beliefs, ideas from bad experiences, negativity, as well as a lot of emotions, which we would call them unhelpful emotions. You see, early on in evolutionary science, early human being would have to have a very strong ego, which was filled with strong drives for survival, almost like selfish, to obtain food, to hunt, to look after oneself and defend oneself. In other words, a large amount of aggression, which was necessary to survive in such a harsh environment. Although today things have changed, obviously, with our moral and development and scientific development, these emotions such as anger and aggression and selfishness are no longer suitable, and then the ego is often frowned upon, and some persons will even say, yes, we need to get rid of the ego. As a cognitive scientist, I cannot support this idea of releasing the ego completely, because I think the ego is the source of self, is the realization of self at its core, and that if we eliminate it altogether, we could end up very confused and not knowing, in fact, who we are and where we're going. So yes, the ego is important, but the ego, as it is in many cases, still carrying within itself the DNA of the early man, of early development. Those drives and instincts that I spoke about are still there to some extent, although they are in the subconscious mind mostly, and they come out during times when we become very angry and or otherwise. Also drugs and alcohol can also lower our consciousness to the point where the original ego drives will then emerge. And this becomes a very real problem for those of us that are interested in spiritual development or self-development. So what is the solution? The solution is not really to eliminate the ego completely, but merely to empty the ego, to understand the situation, that we have to that these drives and selfish drives and needs are no longer necessary, and we are living in a world of love and abundance, and that we need to let go of all the negativity, the negative beliefs, judgments and aggressions associated with an egoistic self. So yes, the process I would recommend is clearing out the ego, allowing the authentic self to come through. Now, the authentic self in psychology is the highest part of oneself, the highest, most moral part of oneself. In metaphysics, we actually see that there's a certain consciousness state, and called the authentic self, that pure state of consciousness where there is no negativity or judgment or selfish drives. That would be the authentic self. So the idea is to empty the ego as we understand it of all this selfishness and allow the light of the authentic self to come through. This would come through as a result of spiritual practice, good works, and basically moral development, to the point where we are prepared to let go of those old outdated drives and feelings and thoughts and beliefs, and become a more open and compassionate and empathetic person.